And a good Tuesday to you, Central Georgia. Thanks for tuning in here for a look at your extended forecast. Off to a pretty gray and gloomy start to your Tuesday. Not quite what we had in the forecast for your Monday, but very thankfully we did have the the sunshine for your Monday for Mercer's graduation. And now that that graduation has come to a conclusion, the cloudy skies are not too much of a worry for your Tuesday morning. But we'll go over some areas that have seen some rainfall so far to kickstart the day. And we'll go ahead and talk about what to expect through the remainder of the work week. So first things first, if you did miss it as of yesterday, we were kind of recapping some of the rainfall totals that we've seen here at the beginning of the month of May. Let's go ahead and take a look at that graphic where it does show that we had one day that really put us well above our averages, and the first time that we have been somewhere in these wet categories, these blue boxes, in basically all of 2026. So May, we did have, as of last, I believe that was last Wednesday or Thursday, the 7th of May, that's where we did have some pretty impressive rainfall, 2.34 inches of rain recorded, and that's obviously putting us in the upper end of the range right there compared to average. So we're already, as a matter of fact, over our average for the entire month of May, 3.37 inches of rain compared to that average just over 3 inches. Record stood back in 1957. Don't think we'll really get close to that record, but 11.77. That would be the most rain that we've seen in the month of May all time. And I don't have much confidence in the fact that we'll hit that because we are entering a pretty dry and quiet stretch of weather now that we head into the later portion of the work week starting tomorrow, and especially as we get into Friday or Thursday and Friday. So now just shy of 4 inches below average, pretty much 4 inches below average. We're 2.5 inches above where we should be at this point in the month of May. And the most important thing is finally a green box. And this box will remain green as we go into the end of the month, even if we don't have another drop of rainfall. So it will mark the first time that we've actually been above average for a month in terms of the average rainfall since going back into last August. Yes, it has been an 8-month streak of having these red boxes on this calendar graphic, I guess, for each and every month throughout the year. So drought monitor, we still have the 3 worst types of drought all across central Georgia, where most areas find themselves in a severe drought, but a good chunk of areas find themselves in that red color, the extreme, and then the exceptional drought, which does exist down in southeast central Georgia, areas like Wilcox County, Dodge County, almost all of Telfair County, Wheeler County, and Montgomery counties. But you will notice that these are the areas that have gotten their fair share of some rainfall so far throughout this morning. We've actually had our fair share of rain mainly down to the south of us, and this is good news because that is where the most widespread area in the entire country does exist of that exceptional drought. So they desperately need some pretty impressive rainfall totals, and they have been continuing to get so as of this morning. So light rain is going to continue to be farther to the south, and it is going to be more prominent down in our southernmost counties all throughout your Tuesday. It is going to remain a little bit cooler this week, not necessarily as cool as this afternoon will be, but we still are going to be below average until we're turning up the heat. It is going to be a very quick warming trend, not only just above average, but we look to make the return into the 90s for a good stretch of a couple of days as we head towards the end of your 7-day forecast. So here's a walk around the quad, and it has not really changed so far throughout this morning. Widespread cloud cover and some dense cloud cover that is blocking any sort of image that you can have of the sun shining whatsoever, and also a factor in your forecast that we have seen throughout this morning. Take a look at these flags right here. So we've gotten a shift in wind direction, number one, because the flags were blowing towards the camera as of yesterday. Now they are blowing away from the camera here as we face off to the west, indicating a bit of an easterly direction to your winds, but also you can see a little bit of right to left motion with them. So that's also indicating that more so of a northeasterly breeze that is present down there at the Georgia National Fairgrounds, and that is present all across central Georgia. But these flags, I always like to flip that camera there because it gives us a good reference about what direction and how gusty the winds are. So here's a look at your temperatures first and foremost, where it does appear that there's plenty of darker green that is present over here to the east United States. 60 in Washington, 64 in Virginia Beach. Same number down here in Macon at 64 degrees, 66 in Charleston, 69 in Montgomery, but take a look at this substantial temperature increase. 64 to 72, all the way down to 83 as you go from Macon down to Jacksonville, all the way down to Orlando. And starting to see kind of where these winds are converging together. That is going to indicate our frontal boundary, but also a low pressure center that has established itself kind of there in the north and northeastern Gulf. Temperatures all across the deep south look like they're somewhere in the 70s for the most part, but then we are starting to see some 60s, and the numbers do get a little bit cooler as you go up to the east and the northeast, indicating a slight wedge setup that we do have in place. So there's more humidity and there are some slightly warmer temperatures down to the south and the southwest, especially back over to the west, where you spot the 70 in Starkville, 70 in Huntsville, 72 in Mobile, 73 in Tallahassee. And then you start to see some of those flashes of yellow transition into more of that lime green color and eventually into some areas of dark green that are present even all the way up in the western North Carolina mountains. So 64, that matches the number in Athens and in Augusta, a little bit warmer over there in Columbus. But Central Georgia as a whole is mainly a story of some mid-60s here at the top of the 11 a.m. hour, which also is only about a degree, 2 or 3 warmer than our morning lows that we did hit this morning. Lowest temperature value I saw on the entire temperature map was a 62, and I think that popped up in areas like Americus, might have popped up in Crawford County as well. So we haven't increased that much, and that's giving you an idea about what denser and more widespread cloud cover does. It doesn't allow for your morning lows to drop down as low, so it is a warmer start to the day. However, once you get into that typical time of the morning where your numbers are beginning to warm up, that is not going to be happening because that cloud cover is blocking any sort of solar radiation that we can see. So right now, 68 going to be the warmest. That's going to be in McRae, 67 in Gordon, 67 in Sparta. But for the most part, you're scattered about 64, 65, or 66 on that current temperature map. The winds are also a pretty good factor. And like we were talking about down at the Georgia National Fairgrounds, the breezy conditions out of the east and the northeast are not just present down there. They are present all across central Georgia, anywhere from an 8 to maybe even a 13, 14, or 15 mile per hour sustained wind. Once again, that's going to be the lower number, that number in white that you do see in smaller numbers. But once you get into the southeast of central Georgia, some gusts all the way up to 21, even 22 miles per hour. So this will continue to be a factor all throughout today, and that east and northeasterly direction of the winds is indicating that we do have a slight wedge setup in place right now. And also you can see that right here on your humidity levels, where there is a lot of drier air up to the north and the northeast of us. But you see as you go farther down to the south, there's starting to be at least some lime green or at least some light green colors that eventually transition into a dark green shade as you get into the northern portion of the Florida Peninsula, getting over into the Panhandle. These more humid areas are going to line up with where you see some more widespread rain once we take it to the satellite and radar imagery. But note that southern central Georgia still has its fair share of a little bit of moisture to work with, and that's going to contribute to at least some light showers. So take a look at your difference in your dew point temperatures. Low 50s in northern central Georgia, transitioning down into some low 60s in areas like Unadilla, Cordele, and Americus. Again, this isn't super swampy at all. This is just indicating that there's a little bit more moisture in the air farther down to the south as opposed to the north. So here's a look at your satellite and radar imagery, where once again we are still spotting a couple of isolated sprinkle showers across Macon County, Dooley County, Crisp County, down into Wilcox County. Wilcox County actually had a cluster of some very weak thunderstorms early this morning. There were about 4 or 5 flashes of lightning right beside a core of some pretty heavy rainfall that I imagine a couple localized areas did actually get lucky with in terms of some maybe substantial rainfall totals, maybe closer to about 1/2 of an inch. But most of the rain is going to be well down to our south, and you can see that it actually appears that the cluster of these showers and more so some thunderstorms, which is over here in the northeastern corner of the Gulf, right here around the Big Bend area of Florida, that was present a little bit farther up to the north earlier this morning. So that's continuing to push farther down to the south. And it looks like the entire state of Florida, they're really going to deal with a messy day of some weather, some pretty widespread, substantial rain, which once again, these areas over here in northern Florida, southern Georgia, they desperately do need whatever rain they can get their hands on. There also is the potential for some isolated storms across the Florida Peninsula as this line does push farther and farther down to the south. So over here along the cluster of the Panhandle of Florida, getting into southeast Alabama, southwest Georgia. Once again, pretty widespread rain that we could see the northernmost edge of this cluster maybe creep up into central Georgia, our southernmost counties. The guidance from the National Weather Service, I think, has been honestly pretty spot on throughout today. When I was reading the forecast discussion this morning, it was saying our southern 2 rows of counties, so Dooley, Crisp, Pulaski, Wilcox, Dodge, Telfair, Wheeler, Montgomery counties, maybe a bit of southern Lawrence County. Our southern 2 rows of counties are going to see anything in the way of probably the most substantial rain that will be present today in our viewing area, but overall it's not looking to be very, very substantial. It's not going to be the super soaker that last week's rainmaker was with about 2 inches of rain, but farther down to the south, you are going to see more widespread rainfall totals, and you'll see more of those on and off showers over the course of today. So let's talk about some numbers because we'll focus on the rain chances once we get over to Future View. But 86 yesterday and 59 for a morning low. Both those numbers are 1 degree above your average high and your average low, so pretty much right where we should be this time of year. 98 degrees for a record high temperature. Very thankfully, we are not talking about that like we were in 1916. 1997, 41 was your record low temperature. So also, you could be very cold or pretty chilly, I would say. Honestly, 41 this time of year, I think definitely classifies as cold. And in fact, we're not done seeing the 40s just yet, but I don't think we'll get anywhere near that record low that was hit back in 1997. So no rain recorded yesterday. Your departure stands at pretty much 4 inches below where we should be. Again, not as bad as around 6 to 7 inches, which we have been hovering around for roughly the past couple of months. We get really close to that 7-inch mark. We'll have a weather maker come through and it will knock us down back in the lower end of the 6s, but then we'll have another dry stretch that pushes us all the way back to 7. So we have seen a pretty substantial dent courtesy of that 1 day of widespread rain as of last Wednesday into Thursday. Sunrise yesterday, 6:39 a.m. and your sunset 8:24, yesterday evening. And we will continue to watch that get a little bit later and a little bit later. So yesterday, believe it or not, was can't even get my words straight right down today, 86 for a high temperature yesterday. Finally, an above average day. We've already had one throughout this month, 87 as of last Wednesday. So now the tally goes to 2 above average days as opposed to the 9 below average days that we have seen, whether we topped out in the 70s or we had some temperatures in the 80s. 84 was really close to that average high temperature as of Sunday, but it did fall just about 1 degree short. And then we, of course, went into Monday yesterday where we had a high temperature just 1 degree above that average high temperature of 85 degrees. Well, don't get used to it for the foreseeable future because cloud cover, like I mentioned, is not going to allow us to really warm up throughout the rest of today. We might make it into the upper 60s and start to flirt with the 70-degree mark, but in all honesty, I think this graphic might be more accurate of what is going to happen today, especially if we don't get any peaks of sunshine. I thought an occasional peak of sunshine or two might bring us closer to the 73-degree mark, and that still might happen in some areas. Really, north central Georgia would be the areas that I'm looking at that are kind of closer to the edge of the cloud cover, but mostly cloudy skies, a breezy afternoon, and definitely on the cooler side compared to not only yesterday, but compared to average, which was around the temperature as of yesterday afternoon, as a matter of the fact. 85 for a high temperature. Some areas might not even make it out of the upper 60s throughout today, just due to the cloud cover being so dense, blocking all your sunshine. And if you have some rain-cooled air. So rain is going to be present farther down to the south. If you receive a batch of maybe some steadier or even some heavier rain throughout today, then that could result in more of a substantial cooling trend, keeping the numbers nestled somewhere there in the 60s. But overall, we're not talking about a cold day by any means. It is definitely going to be one of the cooler days that we are going to see on your 7-day forecast. In fact, the coldest day. I don't think I have another day that's really going to be forecasted anywhere close to 73 today or, say, the upper 60s. Easterly breeze around 10 to 15 miles per hour. Occasional gusts that could get up to 25 miles per hour. We're already seeing that in real time if we flash back to the winds and the wind gust graphic that I was showing you. So here's a look at what's going on surface-wise. Obviously, a bit more of an eventful picture than what we did see as of yesterday. So a low pressure center has formed out here in the north and the northeastern Gulf, and that's going to continue to slide along this frontal boundary. But this frontal boundary will also continue its very slow passage through the state of Georgia and now eventually making its way farther down into Florida. So that front was the one that came through yesterday that we were talking about, but it had a very slow motion. It's kind of stalled out at points, and it's kind of parked itself, then it's kicked back into gear. Well, it will continue to do the same thing through Florida, creating a couple of days of rain chances down in the peninsula as you make your way farther down to the south, areas like Tampa, Orlando, then eventually Fort Myers, West Palm, and Miami. But eventually we are going to watch this high pressure try to settle in and try to dry us out, but it doesn't look like we completely get rid of the moisture that this frontal boundary does leave us with. In fact, I think this frontal boundary is really just going to continue to make its way into northern Florida, but not sweep entirely through. And then that's where this system up to the north does come in. So right now it's just looking like a frontal boundary and a low pressure center that are attached, or that is kind of embedded itself within it. And this is actually going to send the northeast area of the country some rain over the course of the next couple of days. But this frontal boundary that is attached over here on the western side of it will continue to push down to the south, and that is going to kind of have an influence on our forecast. Number one, in terms of drying us out, but number two, of also pushing this frontal boundary that is currently just down to our south and our southeast out of the picture. So we'll talk about what we see with that once we get into the later hours of tomorrow. First things first, for the rest of today, as we head into the smack dab in the middle of the afternoon, a couple of isolated sprinkles, still mostly cloudy skies. I once again say that if you do see a peak of sunshine, it's mainly going to be farther up to the north, and that's going to be because you're kind of closer to the edge of that cloud deck or where some thinner cloud cover does exist. Heading into around dinner time, maybe just after dinner time or just before dinner time for some of you, still the main chances of rain are going to be down in our southernmost counties. That does not mean that if you live farther up to the north, you have a 0% chance of rain throughout today. It is just going to be a significantly lower chance of rain in areas like Jasper, Putnam, Baldwin counties, as opposed to what we see down in Wilcox, Dodge, and Telfair counties. So then we progress into the overnight hours. This is the midnight hours, still trying to hold on to some clusters of some showers down in those southernmost counties. And then we start out tomorrow, what I think is going to be mostly cloudy, but we might have some gaps in the cloud cover. But around 8 a.m., still looks like we don't really have much in the way of rain. I wouldn't put it past enough moisture still being present in order to sprout a couple of isolated sprinkles. So I do have a 10% chance of rain, which is mainly around the first half of the day on Wednesday, but you can see these green dots are still in the vicinity of central Georgia as we go into the second half of the day. But notice what you are seeing as we progress farther into the afternoon. Clearer skies all across central Georgia, so we are continuing to push all of that cloud cover out of the forecast, and that is going to indicate right there, kind of as you see this cluster of cloud cover, maybe just an isolated sprinkle chance that is going to be present with the passage of this next frontal boundary. So it's, for the most part, a dry frontal boundary. It's not going to send us anything in the way of rain. Areas up to the northeast are a bit of a different story, but we are going to reinforce the cooler and the drier air that settles in. And you're seeing that filter in all throughout your Thursday, where it is set to be a crystal clear afternoon, that deep blue color in the sky, and not a single cloud that is going to be within view. And that takes us all the way into the 4 a.m. hour on Friday. Looks like the last day of the work week is going to be off to a splendid start in terms of having that spectacular image to walk outside to with plenty of sunshine. So here's a look at your rainfall totals over the course of the next 3 days, but really just over the next 2 days, maybe even just 24 hours as we go into Tuesday and Wednesday. Where are you noticing the green shaded areas? Down to the south. Once again, that is going to be where you are going to see majority of the rain, but you can notice a couple of these splotchy green areas that do get into our northernmost counties. Like I mentioned, you are going to have a non-zero chance of seeing a sprinkle or a light shower if you live in our northernmost counties throughout today and tomorrow. But overall, most of the rain is just going to be found farther down to the south, where you are closer to that boundary, where it does sit down right halfway in between Georgia and Florida. And then some isolated pockets are, of course, going to pop up some higher rainfall totals. You might even have some areas that try to get closer to maybe about 1/4 of an inch or maybe even a 1/2 inch of rainfall. But this isn't really substantial rainfall whatsoever. I don't think it's really going to do anything in terms of the drought monitor, which we are under. But once we get that update of the drought monitor on Thursday, we are expecting some improvement. It won't be from the rainfall from today and for tomorrow. In fact, we're not even going to take today's rainfall into account because all the data does get taken as of today, and then we will get the release on Thursday. So it might be next week before this rainfall gets taken into account. But like I said, overall, it wouldn't make much of a difference. Last week's rainfall is going to be the driving factor, and hopefully, fingers crossed, some improvement with your drought monitor. So 73 for a high temperature today. That cloud cover being so widespread and dense throughout the day is only creating an 11-degree temperature spread. And in all honesty, that might be overshooting it. We might only see about a 9 to 10 degree temperature spread from your morning low into your afternoon high. And that's what happens when you just don't see peaks of sunshine throughout the day. 30% chance of a shower, anywhere from a light shower to maybe an isolated pocket of some heavier or some more substantial rain. Wouldn't even put it out of the realm of possibility to hear a rumble of thunder. We already saw that happen this morning, but overall it's going to be a very short-lived thunderstorm if you do hear any of that. Mainly to the south, but not just limited to the south. And then your 10% chance of rain tomorrow, mainly just going to be for a couple areas that see a sprinkle shower. In all likelihood, you're probably not going to see much rain throughout your Wednesday, but 55 for a morning low. So going to be a little bit cooler tomorrow morning as opposed to what we did see this morning, nestled mainly in the mid 60s, but we did see a lot of areas dip down as low as the lower 60s. 81 for a high temperature. So we are welcoming back sunshine as we go mainly into the second half of the day. Overall, I might change this icon into the cloudy decreasing icon because we'll have more clouds present in the morning as opposed to the afternoon when you are making your way home from school and work. So 81 for a high temperature, which is going to be warmer than the 73 or maybe even 70 degree mark that we do try to get to today. However, it is still going to be below average for this time of year and not necessarily feeling quite as warm as what we did have as of yesterday afternoon with a high temperature of 86. 55 for a morning low again on Thursday, and then 79 for a high temperature. And that's with crystal clear skies. We're not talking about cloud cover really in the forecast whatsoever throughout your Thursday. So this is also indicating that once our frontal boundary passes later Wednesday into early Thursday, that is going to usher in a slightly cooler air mass, and that's going to keep the numbers just a couple degrees below your average high of 85. It might be 86 by the time we get to Thursday. But your high temperatures are going to be closer to the 80-degree mark as we close out the back half of your midweek. So now we go into Future View's humidity graphic where the wedge is still holding strong in northeast Georgia, but we're seeing the return of a little bit of humidity as we go into tomorrow afternoon. This is right in the middle of the day at the midday hour, 12 p.m. And then as the frontal boundary does begin to drive in later Wednesday, more so early Thursday, frontal boundary is going to be out ahead of where you do see this drier air. It takes a little bit more time for that drier air behind the front to usher in. But this is the 5 a.m. hour on Thursday where we will push any remaining shade of light or mint green out of the picture. And we are going to see the dew points drop down for the end of the work week. So without much in the way of moisture in your forecast, we are not going to really have any rain chances as we close out the work week and head into the beginning of the weekend. But take a look at this graphic. Afternoon high temperatures. Yes, I said they are going to be a couple degrees below average for the remainder of the work week. That does not change. Even as we go into Friday, high temperature of 83. We are kicking off the warming trend, but it really takes off in between Friday and Saturday. So Saturday, we are going to start to have a bit of a setup of what we like to call kind of a heat dome, but it is going to be a high pressure ridge, and that is going to continue to lead to some pretty dry conditions on Saturday, although it is going to result in probably one of the more substantial warm-ups we've felt as of recently. 90 degrees for a high temperature and making the return back not only above average, but into those 90s, which we'll talk a little bit more about in just a second. Morning low temperatures, they will feel a little bit cooler tomorrow and Thursday mornings as compared to what you felt yesterday and what you did feel this morning. But 49 on Friday morning, I think that's where you're really probably going to want to grab the light layering for just one singular morning before the numbers do bounce back up into the mid 50s. So once again, another pretty quick warm up back to closer to average numbers as we get into your morning lows. And again, most of these numbers are going to be just below average by a couple of degrees, but we will see those numbers get back into the 60s for an extended time frame as we go into the end of the weekend and the beginning of next week. So here's a look at your long-range models. Like I mentioned, there's not much moisture to work with on Friday. So we could see some passing clouds, but nothing that looks to result in anything in the way of rain. There are some rain chances up to the north of us, but it doesn't look like any of those come to fruition throughout your Saturday. So Saturday is going to be a hot one, but at least it is going to be a dry one. might be the first time that you can actually go outside and maybe enjoy the luxury of your pool. With a high temperature of 90, that pool water is actually going to get decently warm for probably one of the first times that it has done so throughout the last month or two. Now we go into Sunday, and Sunday is where I think we are going to see some moisture come back in the forecast, and that might result in a very low chance of something trying to pop up, and we could continue that into next Monday. It's only a matter of time before you do start to have some moisture paired up with some numbers that say are in the low 90s. That's what typically happens as you progress into the summertime season. And like we always talk about, May is just giving you a bit of an early preview of that summertime season. And then we go all the way into Tuesday. Looks like there is a lot of widespread rain, at least according to the Euro. The GFS has more patchy shades of some green back over to the west and the northwest. So it does appear that once we get into the midweek next week, we could be looking at our next weather maker to try to take shape, but it remains to be seen if that stays organized as it makes its way all the way into central Georgia. So like you saw on all of the dew point graphics that we were showing, there's a decent amount of moisture in the air, and it's kind of a dividing line. It's not one plot fits all for all of central Georgia, because some areas are in that comfortable range. They're well down in it, as a matter of fact, but some areas are going to be closer to dew point temperatures in the 60s right now, and that's farther down to the south. Nonetheless, as that dry front comes through in between Wednesday and Thursday, that's when we drop the moisture levels down, and it does remain pretty low until we get into Sunday and Monday, where it does look like we'll have at least some moisture content, kind of like what we're dealing with as of today and as of tomorrow. So that's when I think at least a sprinkle chance might be reintroduced into your forecast. We're not talking about anything in the way of substantial rain or maybe even pop-up thunderstorms. We need the moisture content to be up here in the dew point temperatures box in the dark green, the very muggy category, and I don't see that coming to fruition. So here's a look at your 7-day forecast. Kind of a tale of two different seasons, feeling more like spring weather each of the next 4 days, where we will have some nice and pleasant temperatures to kind of round out each and every afternoon for the remainder of your work week. 30% chance of rain is the most substantial that we have on any day of your 7-day forecast. 10% chance of a sprinkle, and then we go into Thursday and Friday where the moisture content drops down, that we are electing to not go with any rain chances. And then that takes us into the weekend. Again, Friday morning going to be the coolest time frame that we have of any point of your 7-day forecast. May want to just plan to have the light layering and ready to go, especially given the fact we could see some numbers to get a little bit below that, but hovering somewhere closer to the 50-degree mark as you walk out the door on Friday morning. Then going into the afternoon, 83, making the return a little bit closer to average, but then we will soar way above average into the 90s, and not just 90, the low 90s as we go into Sunday and into Monday. Sunday forecasted to be the warmest day out of any day of your 7-day forecast, and that's the same story across most of the state of Georgia. But once we get to the end of the weekend and the beginning of next week, we will have a little bit more moisture back in the forecast. That's why I elected to throw those 10% chances of rain back on there, but still nothing to really worry about. And in all honesty, your 7-day forecast is kind of just a roller coaster ride up, but we're not dropping back down the roller coaster. It is going to be a very quiet and a very easygoing stretch of weather that we do have over the next 7 days after we get rid of the cloudy skies and some of those rain chances that are present really throughout the beginning of the midweek today and into the first half of tomorrow for the most part. But our first 90-degree day, we talked about it a little bit yesterday. I wanted to bring you a little bit of a refresher. Typically happens on May 5th. So right now, yes, we see the 90s at the end of the 7-day forecast. You may be saying, Alex, it looks like we are actually going to be behind average. We're going to be a little bit later than usual to see those 90s. Well, let's circle back to a date, April 17th, where we in fact did hit the 90-degree mark. 91 degrees for a recorded temperature. So yes, we were well before average in terms of hitting the 90s for the first time this year. But overall, the first stretch of 90s, where we are going to have the 90s consistently for a couple of days, is looking to settle in behind when we averagely see at least that first 90-degree day. But typically, once you get into late May, the 90s do become more and more common. And it looks like they might be here to stay, as we are looking to stay above normal for May 19th all the way into the 25th, getting into the tail end of the month. And again, this box right here is 4 boxes over to the right of the middle, and it actually indicates a 60 to 70% chance of seeing those above normal numbers. So we'll be somewhere that's feeling at least like 90 as we go into the extended portion of your forecast. and definitely giving you a bit of an early preview of summer. But like I said, very fortunate timing as Memorial Day weekend will be upcoming next weekend. And obviously you'll want the warmer temperatures for those lake and pool days. So that'll do it for your extended forecast here this Tuesday. We'll be back again tomorrow at 11 a.m. to break down what's ahead.